The sun was sinking low over the endless Texas plains, throwing long golden streaks across the horizon when Jackson Cole rode into the dusty little town of Willow Creek. His boots were polished, his hat pulled low, and the silver buckle on his belt gleamed like a mirror. Everyone in town knew that name, Jackson Cole, the rancher who'd turned nothing but a patch of dirt into a fortune. He was a self-made millionaire, a cowboy with steel in his eyes and no mercy in his business. When Jackson came knocking, it wasn't for a friendly visit. It was to settle accounts, collect debts, and remind folks that promises had prices. But that evening, as the warm wind whispered through the prairie grass, Jackson was riding toward a debt that would change his life forever. He wasn't coming for land or cattle this time, just repayment of a small loan he'd given to an old friend, a man named Tom Hayes. Tom had been a good worker once, loyal and kind, but 2 years ago he'd borrowed money from Jackson, promising to pay it back once his crops came in. The crops never came, and the letters stopped arriving. So now Jackson had come himself, but what he found when he reached the edge of the Hayes farm was not what he expected. The once proud homestead was quiet, the fences broken, and the barn half collapsed under the weight of time and neglect. Jackson dismounted his horse, his boots crunching on the dry earth, and walked toward the house. He could feel the silence pressing around him, heavy and sad. When he knocked, there was no answer. He was about to turn back when the door creaked open, and a woman appeared, young, pale, and tired, her dress faded from too many washings. In her arms, she held a baby barely a year old, and behind her 4 small children peeked out from behind her skirt, their wide eyes filled with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "Can I help you, sir?" the woman asked softly. Her voice was steady but weary. Jackson took off his hat out of habit. "I'm looking for Tom Hayes, he said. The woman's lips trembled. "Tom passed last winter," she whispered. "Fever took him." For a moment Jackson said nothing. He'd known hardship all his life, but the words hit him harder than he expected. He cleared his throat, glancing past her shoulder into the dim room. There was hardly anything inside, just a wooden table, a few chairs, and a stove that looked too cold for comfort. "I'm sorry to hear that, ma'am," he said finally. "I didn't know." The woman nodded, clutching the baby closer. "You're not the first man to come asking for something," she said quietly, "but I don't have anything left to give." Her words stung more than she realized. Jackson had come to collect a debt, but now, standing in front of her, he saw a family on the edge of survival. The children's faces were thin, their clothes patched and worn. The oldest boy, maybe 10 years old, stared up at Jackson with defiance in his eyes. "We don't have money," the boy said. "You can go." Jackson looked at the boy for a long moment, then back at the woman. "Ma'am," he said gently, "I'm sorry to intrude. I didn't know the situation. I just came to take what little we have left," she interrupted, her voice breaking. "Please, sir, if you've got any kindness left in you, don't take from my children." Her words cut through him like a blade. Jackson opened his mouth to explain, but the baby began to cry, and she turned away, rocking the child in her arms. He could see the exhaustion in every movement she made. This wasn't a woman who needed a collector. She needed a miracle. Jackson took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He'd built his empire by being hard, by never letting emotions cloud his decisions. But this was different. The wind carried the faint sound of the children's laughter turning into coughs, and something inside him shifted. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small leather pouch, and placed it on the table just inside the doorway. "I'm not here for payment," he said, quietly. "That's for you." The woman froze. "I don't take charity." "It's not charity," he said. "It's repayment. Tom once helped me fix my fence after a storm when I had nothing. Guess I still owed him." Their eyes met, hers full of disbelief, his full of something he hadn't felt in years. Compassion. He tipped his hat and turned to leave, but her voice stopped him. "Wait," she said. "Why would you do that? You don't even know us." Jackson paused, looking at the horizon where the sun was melting into gold and red. "Maybe I needed to remember what it's like to be human," he said softly. Then he mounted his horse and rode away, but he didn't go far. Something in that broken farmhouse called to him. That night, he set up camp not far from the property. unable to shake the image of the woman's eyes, tired but strong, like someone who'd fought too many battles and still refused to surrender. Over the next few days, Jackson found excuses to ride by. One day, he brought extra firewood. Another, he left a sack of flour and beans on the porch. The widow, whose name he learned was Clara, tried to refuse at first, but hunger and humility softened her pride. Slowly she began to talk, about Tom, about the drought that had taken their crops, about how she worked odd jobs in town just to feed her children. Jackson listened, and for the first time in years he found himself wanting to help without expecting anything in return. The millionaire cowboy, who had once measured life by profit and loss, began to measure it by kindness. Each visit made the lonely rancher feel something he'd forgotten: purpose. One cold morning, as frost glimmered on the grass, Clara's youngest fell ill. Without hesitation, Jackson rode through the night to fetch the doctor from town, paying him double to come quickly. When the doctor left, saying the baby would be fine, Clara wept with relief. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. Jackson looked down at the little child sleeping peacefully. "I reckon I did," he said. "Tom was a good man. He'd have done the same." From that day on, he became part of their lives, fixing the fences, mending the roof, teaching the older boys how to ride and rope. The town started to whisper. Some said the cold-hearted cowboy had finally found his heart. Others said the widow had tamed him. But Jackson didn't care what anyone said. For the first time in his life, he wasn't counting money. He was counting blessings. Every laugh from the children, every smile from Clara, chipped away the walls around his heart. He had come to collect a debt, but it was his own soul that had been in arrears, and slowly, through kindness, he was paying it back. As the season changed and wildflowers began to bloom again, Jackson stood on the porch beside Clara, watching the children chase butterflies across the field. "You know," he said quietly, "Tom once told me this land had good bones." He was right. Clara smiled faintly. He always believed better days would come. Jackson nodded. Maybe they finally have. The air was warm, the world felt new, and somewhere deep inside him, Jackson Cole, the millionaire cowboy, realized that the greatest riches weren't in his bank, but in the lives he could change. Weeks turned into months, and Jackson's visits to the Hayes farm became part of life itself. The once silent home now echoed with laughter, the scent of fresh bread, and the rhythm of new beginnings. Jackson had fixed the barn, planted seeds in the dry field, and built a swing from an old oak tree where the children played every sunset. But what grew strongest wasn't the crops. It was something quiet and deep between him and Clara. She had begun to smile again, not the kind that hides pain, but the kind that reaches the eyes. Still, both knew where they stood. Jackson was a man of the world, wealthy and known. Clara was a widow with 5 children and a worn heart. Yet, when their hands brushed, passing a basket, sharing a cup of coffee, the world seemed to pause. One evening a storm rolled in. Jackson stayed to help secure the animals, rain soaking his hat and coat. Inside, Clara lit a lantern, and when he stepped in dripping wet, she laughed softly. The first real laugh he'd heard from her. As thunder roared, the two stood near the fire, silent, saying everything words could not. Jackson looked at her and said, "I came here to collect a debt, Clara, but I think I owe more than I'll ever repay." She met his gaze, tears shining. "You've already given us more than we could dream, Jackson." He shook his head. "No, you've given me something money can't buy, a reason to care again." Outside, the storm raged, but inside, 2 hearts finally found peace. From that night on, the people of Willow Creek whispered about the cowboy who came for money and found love instead. And every time Clara's children laughed under the wide Texas sky, Jackson knew. The richest man alive wasn't the one with gold in his hands, but grace in his heart. The days after the storm felt different, softer somehow. The morning sun poured through the broken clouds like a promise, and Jackson found himself riding to the Hayes farm, not out of duty, but out of longing. The children ran to greet him now, their laughter chasing away the ghosts that once haunted the place. Clara would stand on the porch, her apron dusted with flour, her smile waiting like home. Jackson had faced droughts, rival ranchers, and 1,000 hardships, but nothing made him more nervous than that gentle smile. One afternoon, he brought her a small wooden box. "What's this?" she asked. "Something I made," he said, his voice rougher than usual. Inside lay 5 carved horses, one for each child. Clara's eyes filled with tears as she touched them. "They're beautiful, Jackson." He shrugged, looking away. "Just thought every cowboy needs a horse." It was a simple moment, but it changed something between them. She began to see the man beneath the hat, the one who had known loneliness just as deeply as she had. And he saw in her not a widow, but a woman of courage and grace who had built a world from ashes. As spring ripened into summer, the fields began to bloom again, and life slowly returned to the land. Jackson built a new fence around the property and taught the eldest boy how to ride. Sometimes, Clara would stand by the window, watching him laugh with the children, her heart torn between gratitude and fear. She'd lost once. Could she risk loving again? One evening, as the sun dipped low, Jackson took off his hat and said softly, "Clara, I came here to collect what was owed, but I reckon I found something worth more than money. If you'll have me, I'd like to stay, not as a visitor, but as part of this family." Tears spilled down her cheeks as she whispered, "Then stay, Jackson. We've all been waiting for you to come home."